Hey, how much worse can this get? The answer to that is much worse, but in the short term, maybe not so much worse. If it's a lot worse in the short term, I'm talking over the next couple of weeks or months, in regards to a stock market decline, then you can only make comparisons really to 1929. But right now, that's not my base case, even though a lot of data suggests that that is a good possibility. I don't want to entertain the idea too much of a Great Depression without sufficient evidence from the chart also confirming it, right? Now, what I want to go over is this, because historically, it gets much worse. This is the decline so far. In 2008, the first move down was 20%. The move we just had down in the S&P was 22% and 27% down in the Nasdaq. But this one happened 2.5x faster than in 2008. And for the S&P 500 to have its first 20% decline in the dot-com bubble, it took 4 times longer. In 1974, it took 5 times longer. So we've already completed the first move that happened that confirmed at that point that you were going into a recession and a recessionary bear market. And as we know, we have negative GDP, which is out from the Federal Reserve, and we have rising unemployment. We have enough of a unemployment rate rise to qualify as a recession based on every historical example. So as you know, GDP now is currently minus 2.8%. It was down at 3.7%. Maybe it's worse right now, right? This looks like the S&P 500 chart as well, and this is also validating the S&P 500's decline. Okay, and it started contracting in late February, which is just what the S&P did as well. So, as you know, the unemployment rate has risen more than enough to qualify as a recession based on historical examples. And what I'm referring to is this. Let's see if I can get it up on my other monitor and do this. US recession indicator. All right. So we have risen and now it's 0.8%, which might not seem that bad. Keep in mind, it only requires a 1.4 to 2.1% rise in the unemployment rate to crash the stock market by 50% historically. In 1974, when stocks went down 50%, it only required a 1.4% rise in unemployment rate to crash it by 50%. In 2000, it only required a 1.9% rise in the unemployment rate to crash the stock market by 50%. In 2008, it required a 2.1% rise in the unemployment rate to crash the stock market by 50%. I'm referring to the S&P 500. So we have everything that historically, again, you can see the rise in all previous examples of where we went into recession. We have negative GDP, which is also coinciding with this, right? So going back to this, how bad can this get? Well, the market was as overvalued now when it comes to the P ratios as in 2000 at the peak of the dot-com bubble, and almost as bad as in 1929 before the Great Depression. The market cap to GDP ratio is more than twice as high as it was at the 1929 peak, and it was 137% in .com and it was 208% at this recent peak. In 2007, the P ratio was half of what it was at this peak, and the market cap to GDP was half of what it is or what it was at this peak. So you can see the date here and the length of the bear market, 22-month bear market. In 1974, 50% decline. In 2000 was a 31-month bear market, 50% decline in the S&P. This is a 58% decline in 2008, an 18-month bear market. In 2008, in 1929, there was a 34-month bear market with a 90% decline. So, based on where we are in the business cycle, the answer to this is, as you know, bulls are playing with fire. When the yield curve comes out of inversion, again, let me go over this real quick, right? Green horizontal line is the inversion line. Anything below is the inverted yield curve. When the yield curve is inverted, the purple line is low, which is the unemployment rate. When the yield curve comes out of inversion, you get a green vertical zone, which is a recession, that's the GDP contraction, with rising unemployment in purple, okay? And stocks go down in red. Same thing right here. Warning of a GDP contraction and rising unemployment in 6 to 24 months. You go into recession, stocks sell off, unemployment goes up. Inversion in the yield curve here, it comes out of inversion, unemployment goes up, stocks go down. Inversion of the yield curve here, unemployment goes up with yield curve, stocks go down. inversion of the yield curve here, comes out of inversion with the unemployment rate, stocks go down. And obviously the chart looks like this right now. So this is nowhere close to being over, but we might be hitting a local bottom soon. In fact, just based off the statistic that I brought up on my Twitter, it would seem that we're probably fairly close to a short-term bottom because we are making comparisons to the Great Depression here, right? And you can see here are the stats in this example. The good news here is that you bounce back hard, 10 to 20%. The bad news is right here it was the beginning of the Great Depression, right? In the first example. So it's not good that we're seeing selling pressure equivalent to during very bad times in the past, and it's happening right when it's supposed to based on the business cycle. So what's going to continue happening is the stock market is going to continue selling off, the yield curve is going to continue spiking, and the unemployment rate is going to spike with it. Okay, that's what always happens. I don't know the bottoms. Here we have historical examples. If it hurts your feelings for me to bring this up, here's history. Okay, if you think this is over, it could be over in the short term, and you're going to get bounces. That doesn't invalidate anything. You have had a large enough rise in the unemployment rate and a 2.8% GDP contraction, which is twice as bad as Q1 2008, and the speed of which we're crashing is 2.5x worse than 2008. Just for context, okay? If you want to compare this to the GFC. In the global financial crisis, first in January 2006, the yield curve inverted, predicts a rise in the unemployment rate, which will lead to a GDP contraction in 6 to 24 months. In July and October 2022, the yield curve inverted. This inversion was way longer. It was 26 months. The longest one we have seen before that was 23 months before the Great Depression. Okay? And it came out of inversion in September of 2024. Just like this one came out of inversion in June of 2007, 6 months before the recession began, which began in December 2007. And this one began in late February or early March of this year. Okay? Now, in May 2007, the unemployment rate bottomed, just like in April 2023, the unemployment rate bottomed. On September 18, 2007, the Federal Reserve cut the interest from 5.25% terminal rate, the exact same date as in September 2024, but exact same date and the exact same amount, right? So first rate cut from 5.25% terminal rate, exact same as before the GFC, exact same date, but exact same amount, okay? September 18th, 2007, September 18th, 2024, minus 50, minus 50, down to 4.75, down to 4.75. All right, October 2007, S&P 500 tops. February 2025, SPX tops. December 2007, the recession begins. It wasn't officially announced until December 2008 by the NBR and lots of revisions. In February 2025 or March of 2025, the recession begins because we have the GDP contraction, which is twice as large almost now as in Q1 2008, and the unemployment rate has risen enough to qualify as a recession based on all historical examples. Okay. The question now is, when does the S&P bottom? When does the unemployment rate peak? I don't have the answer to that. We can only look based off historical examples. I'm looking for the unemployment rate to continue spiking. When it's up 1.5 to 2%, the stock market could bottom, and it bottoms before the unemployment rate peaks. Okay. As you can see, the unemployment rate peaked 7 months after the S&P 500 bottomed in this example. All right. It took 38 months for the whole process to play out from the yield curve inversion to SPX bottom, January 2006 until March 2009. It took 45 months for the whole process to play out from yield curve inversion to unemployment rate peaking between January 2006 to October 2009. It's because of this that people doubt it, but it's always correct. All right. So huge bounces are coming. You should be expecting that, but the business cycle is intact. Everything is playing out how it normally does. All right. And it's the same thing with the Fed funds rate. If you want me to cover that, I guess I could do that. No problem. I'll do that. Let's go to SPX right here. Let's remove this. Let's go to log scale. Let's overlay the Fed funds rate. Let's overlay the unemployment rate, and you can see. Change the color of the Fed funds rate. When interest rates drop in red and unemployment goes up, you go into recession. Interest rates drop, interest rates go down in red. That's the Fed funds rate. That's the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. And the unemployment rate goes up, and you get a stock market crash and a recession. And if you think that it's comparable to that, keep in mind, in 1990, the market was fucking cheap. Okay, it was not in a bubble. Let's just look at where the market cap to GDP ratio was in 1990 before that collapse, right? 57%. At the peak here, it was 207%. Let me remind you that Warren Buffett says you're playing with fire at 200% market cap to GDP. Okay? And mean is 85%. All right? And we've already gone down more than 1990. Already in the first move down. Okay? So mean is 85%. This was at 207%, which suggests that S&P to get back to fair value. I'm not saying it's going to get there, but to get back to fair value would be around 60 to 65% down. Now I'm gonna turn bullish when it's 50 to 70% down. Okay, and I'm just looking for the business cycle to play out. There's no specific price. The average recession decline is minus 35%. Now Buffett referred to it as probably the best single measure for valuation stand at any given moment. All right, and he is winning. He's up on the year while everything else is tanking. All right. So let's go back to the chart here. When interest rates drop in red, and we might say, well, they dropped here and the stock market went up. Yeah, because the unemployment rate was on a downturn in purple and the yield curve had never inverted. All right. Right here, when interest rates went down and the unemployment rate went up, stocks sold off, we got a recession. Right here, when interest rates dropped, the unemployment rate went up, stock market dropped, you got a recession. Interest rate cuts don't help. The market decline happens during the rate cuts because interest rates reflect growth in inflation expectations. If interest rates go down, set by the central bank, that's the overnight lending rate, it means the 2-year yield is going down because that's what they're following. That goes down because people are seeking safety and liquidity. All right? Same thing right here. Fed funds rate down, unemployment rate up, stock market down. Fed funds rate down, unemployment rate up, stock market down, like in every example. All right. So it's just a regular business cycle. The tariffs can turn a recession into a depression. That's what's dangerous here. I don't know if the first move is done. We might temporarily bottom, and then maybe we don't take out that low until August. But again, as I pointed out, right, in my previous uh, video, right, which is the Japanese stock market, it's extremely dangerous because of what they're doing. Okay, those lows are gonna get revisited. They've engineered liquidity for the mother of all crashes. It might just take a while. What they've done now is that they bounced it again. Equal lows means everyone has their stop loss and liquidations beneath there. People borrowed cheap yen, and then there's going to be a global deleveraging event from the biggest global liquidation event you've ever seen in your lifetime. Okay, we're already seeing margin calls not seen since Lehman Brothers in 2008. All right. So it's not a good thing. Same thing with the VIX spike, right, which I mentioned early March. That's coming. And SVXY, when you buy this, you're shorting volatility. If this goes down, it means the VIX is going up, and the people who are shorting volatility are getting wrecked. Okay, okay. So this is playing out the same way. You have the quarterly triple bearish divergence on the S&P 500, right? Which the target for this would be the COVID lows. Target should get hit in 1 to 2 years because that's how long bear markets normally take. You can see the selling strength only seen there in Black Monday 1987, .com, GFC, COVID, right? So while we might temporarily bottom somewhere around here with what's going on in Japan, I don't think there's anywhere close to being over. And with where we are in the business cycle, um, right, which the stock market is further down now, the yield curve has moved up a bit, and the unemployment rate's moving up again. It would seem that we're nowhere close to being over, right? That would be like sitting here when the red line is the stock market, right? That's like sitting and saying that that's the bottom, and we still have this decline to do, which is another like 40, 50% down from there. Well, it's 40% down in this example and 50% down here compared to right here, where it temporarily bottomed. So it's still, let's sit there and say that's the bottom. There's nothing that suggests that. And this is going to be painful. Normally bottoms happen when the Fed funds rate is very low and unemployment is very high. Okay, we're not there yet. It's moving up, the unemployment rate. The Fed funds rate is moving down, but we're not at the end of the business cycle yet. Okay. All right, that's all. Take care. Enjoy. Peace.